Hello and welcome to the 20th edition of Half Hour, a podcast starring me, John Paul Giudice, as your host. In today's episode, I'll discuss Germany with Maren Liedtke. Thank you
Hi.
for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Hope I said your last name right.
Liedtke, yeah, it's okay. Don't
Liedtke.
worry.
Okay. So just to start off, tell us a little about yourself, where you're from, and what you're doing here in Prague, things like that.
Well, I'm Maren. I'm from Germany, from the beautiful city of Erfurt. It's a really small city in the middle of Germany, and I think for most people that are not from Germany, it's well unknown. I came to Prague because I wanted to study international relations. However, in Germany, it's quite hard to find something that is also taught in English, because I don't think you need international subjects in German. So I looked around and I found Prague. I just applied and they wanted me, so that's why I'm here.
Yeah, Prague's good. Prague kind of chose me in a way.
It's really nice.
I was kind of I didn't choose Prague. Prague chose me, and people crack up. They're like, "What are you talking about?"
But it's true. As soon as you're here, it's a different vibe. The people are really open, and it's really international, multicultural vibe going on here, and everyone is basically getting along, I think. So.
Yeah, I see that too. And when I go home and they ask me "Oh, do you have a lot of Czech friends?" I always say yes, but I have friends from all over the world here, and that's a pretty interesting piece of this city, especially because it's so international. We're in the same major, so it's yeah, it's good. I think that honestly, the IR courses at UNIP are actually pretty good. My old school, I was in political science, and it was just a different track.
In Boston, or?
Yeah, outside of Boston, Bridgewater State.
Okay. I think the UNIP, University of New York in Prague, also gives you the chance to experience other cultures without actually traveling there. And then, of course, if you have the connection to the people, it's easier to travel to those countries and to see it from another point of view. Not from a tourist point of view, but actually from a native, or being introduced to that culture personally.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, after traveling a bit around the Czech Republic, I mean, we did a few hiking trips.
Yeah.
There were a few other trips that were done, just in general. I went to Brno a week or two ago. That was kind of cool. It really goes to show you the differences you can see. But if you want to jump into the subject straight away, I don't have a problem with that. So what was one of the first points you were thinking of?
Well, I'm really interested in the conflict between East and West Germany, and I was born in former East Germany, in the heart of former East Germany, and I think there's still a lot of differences between. Now it's one state, but it's a different culture between both societies, not only from an economical point of view, but also finances, and also how the people behave, and also the language, the language barrier, I think, and in general, education too.
Yeah, so I remember you were telling me the other day about the employment differences in East and West, and how in East Germany it was a little more more people were employed, and a little bit more unified in terms of across the ages, and men and women, and all of that.
Yeah, well, in general, of course, West Germany, because it was connected to the US, it was very open from the beginning, and also economically stable really fast after Second World War. Whereas East Germany, in comparison, they were not as economically stable, and they needed more workforce. So what do? Obviously, introduce the women into the workforce too, and with having a low economic standard as a disadvantage, you had another advantage of being more equal, and treating women as equal, and then also having a more equal society. I think in East Germany it's not that big of a difference between the wages of women and men, because they're treated the same. whereas you can see like during the time of the separation of East and West Germany, more women were staying at home and like taking care of the kids, whereas the men went to work. And East Germany, as I already said, both went to work. And I think nowadays you can see kind of a pattern in that too. Of course, in general, I think Germany is really an equalized country. Like they care about equal rights, they care about equal payment. So it developed, but still, I think East Germany did a good job there.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking about how like these differences. Like Germany's the only country in the world that has been like divided and then reunified in this way. Like between like, okay, you had capitalism in the West and then communism in the East, and like, you know, different flavors of each kind of going through in the decades. Like I'm sure like East Germany had more relaxed leadership at one point, and then I know in the 80s it was a bit more like stringent. But that it's actually a pretty unique thing because, you know, a lot of the other states that were nearby, like, you know, like Czechoslovakia or Poland, they were kind of like whole. And like they transitioned away from communism in the early 90s, right? And then like Germany was one where it was like reunified, and then you can probably see internally like the differences, especially in like architecture and like how things look. Like I notice here in the Czech Republic, I notice things like the sidewalks or the guardrails. Like I don't know, even some of the buildings. Like you look at them and they're just slightly different than maybe what you'd find in the West. So does it exist in like architecture too, like to a big degree, or?
Yeah, but I think nowadays a lot has been restored and restored and everything. And in general, roads, maybe sidewalks, as you said, but buildings in general, I think you can see that, for instance, with the universities in Jena, Leipzig, or even in Berlin, they look really modern, but these are completely new buildings, whereas I think some universities in West Germany, for instance, Osnabrück or Trier or whatever, those are more in cultural important, historical important buildings. But as you said, those were two completely different countries during that time, and also meaning that they had completely different histories and cultural values. And I think therefore it's really hard to just put those two characters together again. And even now, after like over 30 years of the unification, I don't think that it's possible to be completely united again. There's a process there, and it's way better obviously than in the 90s, but I don't think we're actually at this point where we can say that both states are completely united.
Yeah, because it's just the decades of separation have just given so much change.
Yeah.
Like I wonder if it's even possible with North and South Korea at this point. I mean, not to say that East Germany was like North Korea.
No.
You know, because that's like a whole nother level. Like they're very, 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 very totalitarian. So.
But it was over decades, and like a whole generation grew up in that state in East Germany and also in West Germany, getting raised with the values and even getting educated in school with those values. And I think for those people, it's the hardest actually to kind of navigate into the unification process.
So would you say that like this kind of disparity like exists on like multiple levels? Like I know that there's like an income difference as well, like because of the, you know, in the East, like the wages are less?
Lower, yeah. Like the wages are lower, then also retirement payments are lower in the East. And I don't know if it's still a thing, I'm not quite sure, but we had that for quite a long time, that the West had to pay, it's called the Soli, so it's basically they're having some money transferred to former East German states.
Oh, I remember talking about this at the beer garden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Okay.
basically for streets, for education, for schools, for buildings, so that East German states get kind of a financial support because they're not as economically strong as the West German states. And then also, I think from the dialects and the language, it always depends on where you are, in which region and which state. But I think in the former East German states, it's more cultural, where in comparison West German states are, because they were connected to the US, it's more open. It's more of an individual society, I think. It's more of a like striving towards your own goal. Whereas I think for me personally it is that way. In East Germany it's more as a community. Of course it depends if you're in a city, if you're in a village, and then also in which city you are. But I experience it that way.
So where you grew up, how many people live there? Is it like very populated, or is it more like rural, suburban kind of?
Well, my state is Thuringia, and I live next to the capital, Erfurt. And in my capital, there are like, I think like 25,000, something like that, 100,000. Not a lot of people, but it's a really nice place. I think it has more trees than people in general.
Okay.
Like the state is just one big forest actually, but it's nice, and people like to call it the green heart of Germany. But also there are a lot of important historical and cultural places, just as my city, Erfurt, and also the neighbor cities Weimar and Jena, where a lot of poets or even political theorists, just as Max Weber, for instance, or even
He's from there.
He's from my city,
Oh.
or even Karl Marx. He spent time in Jena. Like all these important figures, or Martin Luther, like he went through the state. He's from my state, and there's a lot of connection between those important figures, and or for instance, Reformation took place in my state, and there are a lot of important cultural and historical events happening there.
I was gonna say I share a birthday with Karl Marx.
Really?
Yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, where I come from, I'm from a city of 50,000, and what I notice about Europe is that like you have like these like cities, and then there's some space around it, and then there's another like town, or at least in the Czech Republic, like that's what I noticed.
Yeah.
Like you leave Prague, and it's like there's a clear defined line between like settlements and not settlements, like where there's like a field, and then there's like another town. Like in the US, it's very much like spread out, and like it's not so like clearly defined. Like I feel like it's very like separated here.
Yeah, I think in Germany it's mostly like the city, then urbanized areas, then the fields, and then the villages around it.
Yeah, and there's like just towns that like dot.
Everywhere.
Yeah, and one thing I was shocked by was the word village. Like just hearing it here, like I don't know, like it's just at home I would never use that word. Like we just we have like we have towns, like cities. I don't know what we'd call something smaller, like just like the middle of nowhere. That's probably what we'd say.
I mean, I live in a village next to Erfurt, so and we have like, I would say 900 people living there. So I think you would also describe that as a village.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of people, but it's really close to the city. So that with that I was quite fortunate. I only need like 10 minutes to go to the city, where other people need to travel like half an hour and don't have any public transport connecting. That's also a thing. Like I think in West Germany it's more connected, all the places.
Oh, okay.
My best friend, she studies in Trier, that's like next to Luxembourg, and there I saw that you're quite connected. Not necessarily in Trier because they don't have a tram, they only have buses, but in general, like if you go to a place like Frankfurt and Cologne, obviously, but of course Berlin is also well connected. But if you go to the smaller cities, smaller towns, and it's getting harder to go home after 10 p.m. if there's no bus driving anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, would you say that even in Berlin, like, there's a difference between like not only the western side and the eastern side, but in terms of like transport, like going places, or is it more like unified now that it's like back together?
I think in Berlin it's actually quite overlapping everything with the unification. Of course, it depends, I think, on the parts where you are in the districts. There are like a few parts that were in former East Germany that are now like the students' districts, for instance, Friedrichshain or Kreuzberg. We went there on our Berlin trip for a little bar trip, and there's more a student district, and the people there, they're more left, more politicized, and they also go out on the street a lot. For instance, for Friday for Future and all those events, they happen mostly there and then go to the center of Berlin.
Yeah, I thought that trip we all took to Berlin was awesome. Like,
Yeah.
I think Berlin was a really nice city. It was very clean.
Yeah.
I mean, like I thought it was very well maintained. But I was reading something interesting about how what is it called? Like the tower, the giant tower.
The TV tower.
Yeah, like the one they have here, except it's like Germany's version.
Yeah.
Apparently, the eastern side built it to show like the superiority of their way of life. But there was this joke that like you could see a cross on there.
Yeah.
And it would work with the sun. So like the sun would shine on it, and then there'd be like a cross logo, and then like the people would just see that, and it was kind of like disingenuous because I know the East was a bit more like atheist, right? Like a bit more like not endorsing state religion.
Well, of course, from the communist regime, that this is not really focused on religion, but also I think because, as I said, the Reformation took place mainly in Thuringia, in my state, what is East German, and also the states around it that are also East German. Most of them are like Protestant, and I noticed a lot of Protestant, like also children born into Protestant families. They're not as religious as their grandparents, for instance. I think nowadays it's in like this in general.
Yeah,
modern society.
In the U.S., it's like that
Yeah.
too. Would you say that like I know in the South there's a lot more Catholics, like
Yeah, in
like
Bavaria, for instance, they have also like the CDU in general is our Christian Democratic Party, and in Bavaria they have like a kind of sister party, CSU, that's more focused on Catholic people, and but Bavaria is something different, so it's a different kind of state there.
Yeah, I remember in our last episode when I was talking about Germany with Marvin, we talked about like the dialects down there. They speak like a little different, right?
They speak more like Austrians. There's like a connection to that, and we also have this joke that like Bavaria is like reclaiming its kingdom again, and that they're gonna be separate from Germany. And
Do you
I
think
hope
they
not
do
that
it?
it's gonna happen. I don't think it's gonna happen, but well, they have a different kind of mentality. Let's say it like that.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to how Texas in the U.S. is kind of like that as well, because you know Texas and California are like these big states that like kind of have a lot of power. I would say like they can just kind of do their own thing. But it's interesting how like in Germany especially like there's just so much like rich history there. Like, and it can go back for quite some time. I mean, one of the like parts of history that really interests me is like the Great Migrations and how, you know, the Germanic tribes were involved in that, and you know the Roman Empire, and like you had like all these groups coming from the east, like moving like west, and like that's part of the reason why the Roman Empire fell was because like they couldn't deal with their own borders, and there were so many people coming in, and you know, you had Christianity and all that, but like I think that in the movies especially, you see the German tribes role in that always being like fighting and like the conquering and stuff. Even I think there were some German kings in Italy as well. Like after the Roman Empire fell, like you had like a few of the like the Visigoths and the Vandals. I think.
Yeah,
I think these are all.
the Vandals. Yeah.
I think they were all German. I'm pretty sure. I don't know though.
I know about the Vandals. I don't know about the others, but the Vandals I know.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's just one of those things where you take a look at the society and the culture, and like Like, okay, I was reading about the 30 Years' War and how that war really had a large influence on German culture today. Um, how like it really made modern Germany in a way. And I don't know, like when we were in that class talking about it, and we learned that the concept of the state was kind of brought up there. That I think you couple that together, and it really kind of paints a good picture.
Yeah, like connecting to that, a lot of things happened. The Varus battle, like the Germanic tribes against the Roman Empire, and then also Charlemagne. He was crowned in German territory and basically like ruled over German and France territory. So a lot of stuff happened, and I think it's a bit ironic if you look closer to German history. Actually, Germany is not united for a very long time. It was like first united in 1871 after the three unification wars basically, and then it got separated after World War II again. So actually there was no real connected German country for a long time. They had like multiple different kingdoms, multiple states with different. They had governments. Some states had governments. Some states had authoritarian kingdoms. So it's actually, I think that's also an explanation to why the language and the cultural values in different regions are so different, and the dialects, of course. Like we have some dialects, for instance, Platt. I think it's mostly spoken in Lower Saxony and Hesse, like kind of in the middle of of Germany. You cannot understand the language. It's like not possible. It's like completely different from German. I think it's more similar to English though. There's some English words in it, and then if you go more into my direction, like you can see a connection between Upper Thuringian to Saxon accent, but if you go lower to Bavaria, you can see connection between Bavarian and Austrian accent. So it's quite fascinating to see that.
I know that like they across Germany they teach like a German like kind of overall language.
Yeah,
right?
we
like,
call it like Hochdeutsch, so basically like the general German.
Mm-hmm.
That everyone uses, and I think mostly in cities, like the people don't have accents anymore. They speak one German. If you like one language of German. If you go to villages, if you go to more rural regions, of course, there you see it. They have really heavy accents, especially the old people.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a few friends from my village and then also neighbor village, and I think their accents are pretty funny because they have like the really typical Thuringian accent in their voice, and it's if I speak with them, I don't have that heavy of an accent if I speak German, but if I speak with them, it's coming out, and it's really funny to see.
Is it like the overall general German? Is that a derivative of a certain like region? Like did they when they whoever was in power decided like okay this is what we'll kind of use as like the overall.
I think it's just like that what people mostly spoke in the villages, mostly spoke in the more educated regions, more in the liberate regions, because they started to not speak in accents anymore.
Like I remember I learned a little bit about how when Italy was unifying as well around the same time, they chose like Tuscan Italian as like the standard, like kind of similar to what you were saying, like general German. Like they picked this, like they took this region's kind of like overall structure, and then I think they took some inspiration from like the Latium region, and then they kind of put that together, and then that was like modern Italian, I guess. But I was reading, you still have Sicilian and like Neapolitan and Venetian, like you have like these little, subdivision languages. So I guess it's similar to how Germany is. But to me, it's such an interesting concept because I feel like in the UK, our language obviously comes from the UK, and they were an island for so long that I feel like their language just became very like unified.
Yep.
Like some people in the UK were telling me, okay, you have a different accent if you're from there, if you're from here, but in the U.S., it's very rare that I wouldn't understand somebody, depending on where they're from. Like, I remember our friend from California.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to share the name right now, obviously, but he said you know the little bottles of alcohol that you buy at the store and it's like one shot.
Yeah.
He calls them shooters. I call them nips, and like I don't. That's just one example of like, okay, there's some words that are different. Like he said that, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like I didn't. I sort of understood what he meant because you shoot it, but that was like one example. But I feel like it's a step down from what you're saying because I can always understand anyone from across the country, even Canada, even the UK. I had a little trouble in Scotland when I was there when I was 17. That was kind of hard, definitely.
I think the Scottish accent is really interesting, and then like combined with the Gaelic words is really interesting to hear. It sounds so rough and tough.
One of my buddies back home, or I haven't spoken to him in years actually, but he's a really smart guy. He's learning Irish because he's Irish. Like that's his like thing. So he wants to reconnect with his roots a little bit, and man, that's a tough language. I remember I would hang out in his room and like he would like have like he would like be writing things down and I'm looking at it like, dude, this is not, because it's not even based off of like any Germanic or Romance language. It's just like its own thing.
That is also a thing what I think is really fascinating to see the connection between, of course, like it's all Latin language and like Roman languages. But like German, French, and English, if you just pronunciate some words differently, you can understand it in another language.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite fascinating how the language is developed.
Two of my friends here that are also German, they were like having a conversation, and I was definitely able to pick out like some very basic things. They were talking about a location or like going somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I kind of picked that out, but the way they described it to me is like English is like German. It's just kind of evolved in a different direction. Yeah. Like we have a lot of words that come from France, but another person told me that English is very like compared to I guess German or like even like French or some other of the languages on the continent. They're very like. It's very like separated. Like you can like specifically put words in just kind of like at will.
Yeah, there's like not really structure there. It's really, for me, it's an easy language to learn compared to other languages that have, for instance, cases like Russian with 6 or 7 cases, and German 4 cases, and then English none. You can just say it.
Yeah.
And like even if you make mistakes or have some errors in your what you're saying, but they can still understand you. It's okay. Mm-hmm. But if you have like a few examples for inspiration or like all these, I think a lot of words are ending with "tion," like inspiration and like all that stuff. If you just say them a bit in like with a German accent, it's like the same.
How would you say it in German?
Inspiration.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically the same word. It's written exactly the same. You just pronounce it differently. I was actually talking with Lily, my roommate from Ukraine, about that, and even with Ukraine, you have a lot of common words like kino, like cinema, or film, like a lot of similarity. So it's like all languages are actually connected, and like even now when everything is so widespread, you can actually see the connection.
I remember you had me read the longest German word
one
time, and that was terrifying.
Yeah, okay, well that's not easy.
Yeah. Do you remember what it was?
I think it was like Rindfleisch, like something with like meat. I don't know. I can't remember the whole thing.
I'm gonna have to pull it up definitely. That was hilarious. Because you guys, what I understood from what you were telling me, but others, is that there's words that we would use many words for in English, but you guys can just use one. Like,
yeah, we have for instance, like having a song stuck in your ear, we have like one word for it, ohrwurm. I saw that there's an English version of it, like earworm, but I never heard someone say it before.
Oh,
so
earworm?
Earworm.
Yeah, it's like when you have a song stuck in your head.
But we have a few of those.
Okay, let me see if I can't find this. Oh, yeah, I found it. Okay. Is it this one?
Oh, yeah. You want to try read it again? Or
I'll go first.
just
I'll
for the
go
fame,
first.
for the fame.
Okay. Rindfleischtätigkeitsrang überwaschen Aufgaben übertragen Gesetz.
Well, it's okay. I can understand like a few things in there.
Well, how would you say
Let me
it?
read it. Rindfleischetikeerungsüberwachungsaufgaben, Übertragungsgesetze. So it's basically about meat and like there's a law how you should observe the production and of the meat and like the selling of the meat.
Yeah, that's.
So you put that in a whole sentence and we have a long word for it.
It's such a interesting concept to me about how this exists across the language, where it's like there's very specific meanings, and it's like you have like a specific word for it.
Yeah.
Like that's I think that's very unique in a language. We
can combine a lot of words and create new words. I think it's actually quite nice. It's confusing for people who actually study German and don't have a connection to it, because then you see a word in a word that you know, but you don't know the other word in that word, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I could ever like learn it. I'm really trying hard to learn Spanish, and that's it's totally hard for me. Just coming from a single language background, but I don't know. Who knows? Someday. I definitely need to go see more of Germany, though. Like I need to go to Munich for sure. I haven't been to Dresden yet. I'm kind of slacking. I gotta go.
But I mean, you've been to Berlin. You've seen that. I was a good tour guide, hopefully.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. The Checkpoint Charlie was awesome,
Yeah.
and I love the Bundestag.
Hmm?
With the glass on
Yeah.
top. Like, that's cool. Like, I think it's nice.
Next time you have the chance to Berlin, maybe you can try to get in and like walk around the class.
Yeah. I wanted to go in.
It's quite nice, but you have to wait a long time, mostly. But I think nowadays you can buy the tickets online, obviously. We're a developed country now. So.
Yeah. We're kind of hitting the end of the time here, but I don't know if you want to mention anything else. Like, if there's anything you wanted to, like, throw in there.
I'm quite happy with the result, and just for the end, I think to come back to the original topic of German, like unification and everything, I think in Germany they did quite a good step forward for unification, and I think the economical crisis that is like happening to us right now, and even like with the COVID already past us, I think those issues shouldn't stop us to actually go forward with the unification and communicating to each other. So
yeah, I know the world's messed up right now, but I think that there's a bright future somewhere. Like I'm very much an optimist. Like, I don't like the pessimistic, like, oh, just give up, it's all meaningless. Like, I don't know, I don't mess with that, because it's just such a defeatist attitude. But I think Germany has proven, like, time and time again, you guys bounce back. Even after the worst calamities in history and all that. So, I don't know. I see Germany having a pretty bright future with their kind of like push forwards. I think the only thing that you guys might be in trouble with is the population issue, because like your population's going down, but it's not the worst thing.
I think it will be. Maybe my little prediction, I think it could be dissolved through refugees coming into our countries, because I think if you compare it to other European countries, my country is like, taking in most of the refugees, and of course it always depends where the people are from, and also what kind of background they have. But in general, I think there's a good integration policy with introducing them to the working place and giving them an education, educating them in the language, but also in what can they do to be financially stable, and then also helping them to bring the family to the country as well.
Well, I gotta say, I mean, I'm happy you came and we had the second edition of this episode. But thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Guys, we're gonna have a lot more episodes coming soon. So cheers and peace out.